John Kelly believed that he was ordered by President Trump to make sure Jared got a clearance despite the concerns.
Trump's hand-picked White House counsel and chief of staff said, no, we have a problem here. There were real concerns.
I was never involved with the security. I don't want to get involved in that stuff.
This is the biggest problem with having family in official positions because it's much harder to be objective.
He was able to shed light on a lot of issues. None of the questions we had for him went unanswered.
They're doing exactly what they said before the election, that their whole goal is to try to impeach the president.
Mr. Weisselberg is definitely in our sights. He knows everything. He's been there 40 years. He has the keys to the kingdom.
I will be back on March 6th. There's more to discuss.
This is New Day with Allison Camerata and John Berman.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your New Day. The New York Times has a bombshell report this morning revealing that President Trump ordered his then chief of staff, John Kelly, to give his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, a top secret security clearance. The Times says the president made that demand despite concerns from intelligence officials, even the top White House lawyer.
General Kelly was apparently so disturbed by what was going on that he reportedly made a contemporaneous memo about the president's order, and this report directly contradicts the president's public denials that he had any role in Kushner's security clearance, which adds to the number of lies that we have learned about this week.
Joining us on the phone now is one of the reporters who broke this story, our friend Maggie Haberman of the New York Times. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning.
How did Jared Kushner get his security clearance?
According to our reporting, it was ordered by the president by way of John Kelly, despite the objections of some career personnel security office folks and the White House counsel, Donald F. McGahn. John Kelly wrote a memo saying that he was the president ordered that Jared Kushner get a clearance. Kelly clearly thought whatever it was that the president was saying, he took it as an order. Why it's striking, among other things, look, Allison, the president has the authority to do this, but he told me when I asked him in the Oval Office several weeks ago that he had no role in this. Ivanka Trump said publicly her father had no role in it. And Abby Lowell, Jared Kushner's lawyer, said last year that this went through a normal process, a point that he made, I think, on CNN, as well as to us, after the clearance came through. There has to be a reason why it was that everybody did not want to point to what had actually happened, and we don't know what that reason is. Again, the president legally can do this, so why say he didn't?
Good point. And we have that audio, and I just want to play it for everybody because, I mean, before we get to why people were so concerned about giving Jared Kushner security clearance, let's just play the exchange that you had with the president where he's not telling the truth about what he did. Listen to this.
Did you tell General Kelly or anyone else in the White House to overrule security officials, the career?
No, I don't think I have the authority to do that. I'm not sure I did, but I wouldn't do it. Jared's a good. I was never involved with the security. I know that he, just from reading, I know that there was issues back and forth about security for numerous people, actually. But I don't want to get involved in that stuff.
He said, I wouldn't do it. Maggie, this is weird because often when the president breaks protocol, he does so proudly. And so the idea that he would lie directly to you, why?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. And, all we've gotten back from the White House is that they don't discuss security clearances. Candidly, I thought there was a real chance when I asked him that question that he was going to say, yes, he did do it. Actually, not more than a real chance. I had assumed that is what he was going to say, but he chose not to for whatever reason. Again, we don't know. It is within his authority to say, regardless of what people think of it, Jared Kushner is who I want to have looking at Middle East peace and looking at a host of other global issues, and therefore he needs his clearance because he can't do his job without it. They could have just said that, and they chose not to.
So now let's get to why people in the intel community and beyond were so concerned. Why didn't Chief of Staff then John Kelly want Jared to have this? Why didn't Don McGahn, White House counsel at the time, want him to have this? Why didn't the FBI and the CIA think that this was appropriate for Jared Kushner?
So I should note here that according to our reporting, and we reported this part last year, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump were very frustrated about the clearance issue when Jared Kushner's clearance was downgraded in February of 2018. After a review of the clearance process, they felt like John Kelly and Don McGahn were targeting them for petty reasons, not for anything legitimate. The FBI and the CIA, during the course of Jared Kushner's background check, had flagged concerns. Among those concerns was that he had not disclosed initially on his application for security clearance some contacts with foreign officials, including a meeting with a Russian banker during the transition. Jared Kushner's folks said that was a clerical error, that it was fixed over time, but there were concerns flagged by intelligence officials about questions of whether he would be susceptible to foreign influence. They noted how many interactions with foreign governments and officials that he personally had, as well as due to his family's real estate business. And this went on for a very long time. It was a source of enormous frustration to the White House that Jared Kushner's security clearance was getting such attention. It was, as I said, a source of frustration to them. And the Personnel Security Office was divided as to whether he should get one. The White House Counsel Office erred on the side of recommending that it not happen.
So, Maggie, what does this mean? What is Jared Kushner privy to now that the intel community didn't think he should see?
We obviously don't know the details, but he's privy to sensitive security information about foreign countries that is a key part of his portfolio as somebody who deals with Middle East peace and deals with other international issues, deals with trade. But it is stuff that FBI and CIA officials have voiced concern about. He still does not have an SCI clearance, which is the one that's attached to a CIA review.
Maggie Haberman, thank you very much for all the reporting and sharing it with us.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good weekend.
All right, I want to bring in Rebecca Buck, CNN political reporter, Joe Lockhart, former White House press secretary under President Clinton, and Margaret Talev, senior White House correspondent from Bloomberg News, whom, if I'm not mistaken, Margaret, just got back from Vietnam flying on Air Force One on that flight. So thank you for waking up. I don't know when the last time you slept was. We're going to give you one more second.
I don't even know what day it is, so we're all good, yeah.
We'll give you a second to rest up. I'm going to go to Joe first with this question. Since you worked in the White House, a few issues raised by this story. Number one, why didn't intelligence want Jared Kushner to have a security clearance? Number two, why did the president basically say meh when all of his intelligence officials are telling him don't do this? And number three, why is he lying about it?
Well, I'll take the third first because it's the easiest, because Trump's instinct on any hard question is to lie first and then to backtrack. You've seen this multiple times, thousands of times, that when he gets pressed on a question where he doesn't know the answer, he just denies. I think on the reasons that the intel community were concerned are a couple. One is his veracity. He didn't tell the truth. He had to file his form 4 times. He has a well-respected lawyer in Washington. He had the resources to do it right. He chose to withhold. The second is, and this goes to the broader Trump organization and the president, he has continued to do business. He's continued to, with his family, be involved in a multi-billion-dollar business around the world that is constantly trying to raise money. And that makes him susceptible to influencing U.S. policy to benefit his business. And that's why, the intel community and the FBI, I think just look at this right and do it by the book. The really significant part is the White House counsel, a political appointee, said no. And he not only said no, he said no to the son-in-law of the president. That's a pretty courageous decision. And, again, why did he lie? Because he lies.
I guess, Joe, though I see it differently, because often the president is unapologetic when he does something that breaks convention and does something controversial. He's so I hear this differently, this lie here, that when he tells Rebecca, no, I don't think I have the authority to do that. No, I wouldn't do it anyway. That is so brazen. I mean, that is such a bald-faced lie. I'm not sure why he went there, and do you have any insight into this?
Right. Well, it's extremely puzzling, right? If the president has the authority to make this decision, and he does, and if, as you said, he has no problem breaking with convention, elevating Jared and Ivanka within the White House, then why wouldn't he own this decision? Why wouldn't he just explain that he assessed the analysis of the intelligence community and thought, that their concerns were without warrant. And so this is exactly why these questions are exactly why we are likely to see congressional Democrats look into this issue further. Elijah Cummings on the Oversight Committee has said that he believes this is an issue worth examining, that they are considering subpoenaing the White House for documents relating to this decision. So I think this is just, Maggie's great reporting is just the beginning here, and we're going to be seeing this issue continue and hopefully get some answers to these very important questions.
Congressional Democrats are going to look into this further. Could be the title of any one of 6 stories today, Margaret, because that's where we are. Michael Cohen finished his 3rd day of testimony yesterday behind closed doors. We learned Michael Cohen's coming back next week to testify behind closed doors to House Intelligence. Felix Sater is coming to testify. Alan Weisselberg, the CFO of the Trump Organization. There are a couple different committees that want him. This seems to be the beginning of what the White House feared when the Democrats took over Congress and what the Democrats rejoiced in, which is oversight, aggressive oversight in investigations that won't go away for some time, Margaret.
Yeah, and John, I think we can see at this point the Democrats' investigation seems to be heading much closer to questions about the Trump Organization, whether it's what happened inside the internal finances of the organization, whether it's related to golf courses or development or contacts overseas. And this, I think, is where the Jared Kushner security clearance nexus and where the Democrats are going have the potential to meet in the middle. We have no idea what, if any, Jared Kushner's exposure is in Bob Mueller's investigations, but we do know that over the course of the last several months, when you talk to lawyers around the White House, around Congress, what many of them say is that the fact that Jared Kushner had gotten his security clearance and that it was able to go forward had given them the sense that he was not sort of in the crosshairs of the investigation. And I think we may see some new questions about that, although, as I said, we don't know the answers to that. But yeah, I mean, look, ever since November, we all know the difference between a divided Congress and a Congress that is of the same party as the president, and we're certainly beginning to see it now, and Michael Cohen's testimony this week is the beginning, not the end of that.
Hey, Joe, big picture on Michael Cohen. Now that we've had a day or so to digest all that he revealed, and he revealed crimes.
Right.
He revealed criminal activity, some of which he says happened in the Oval Office, some before, but there was a whole litany of crimes that any regular people would have to pay for. Having lived through impeachment, as you did, up close and personal, what are Democrats supposed to do now?
Well, I think what Democrats are going to do is, and I think you saw Nancy Pelosi give a strong hint yesterday, which is they're not going to, they're in no rush to get to impeachment. What they want to do is establish a pattern of abuse of power, of criminal activity from in the White House, and a culture of corruption that is not just the president. It goes to the president's family, the president's cabinet. I think, we're going to see a little bit more about some of these people who've left, who are under investigation, and they are in no rush because, again, once they move towards impeachment, then the battle lines are drawn. You can't go halfway in and stop. So I think you'll see this for this whole year. You'll see them establishing a case, particularly if we have a year-long court fight on whether the Mueller report is made public or not. That plays right into the Democrats.
But they establish a case and then they just hope for the best of the ballot box?
Well, I think they establish a case and then in 2020, they run a Democrat against a president who is under investigation by 5 jurisdictions and the House, and they let the voters decide.
But, Rebecca, there's a tension there. If Democrats keep on saying crime, 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 like they do when they come on the show, crime, 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 well, on the other hand, Nancy Pelosi says no impeachment, no impeachment, no impeachment. There is a tension there.
Absolutely. And I think Joe is right, though, that Democrats are laying out the case not for impeachment, but for the president to be judged by the American people. They are, if they're the prosecutors in this case, the voters are the jury. And this is for a couple of reasons. One, I think Democrats feel they're running out of time before the 2020 election. Joe mentioned the potential legal battle that could ensue over the Mueller report and the release of that report. That could take a while in the lead up to the election. And then, of course, there's the political reality here, which is that Democrats don't control the Senate. It would be very difficult for them to get the 67 votes that they need for impeachment. And so this is what they're up against. And so I think they're just dealing with the political reality that's in front of them.
So, Margaret, tell us about that flight home from Vietnam on Air Force One. What did they come back and tell you about why they left empty-handed?
Allison, I wish I had an awesome, juicy briefing about what really happened, but we didn't. We didn't really get visitors to the press cabin, neither the president himself nor aides. We, of course, were very interested to know at precisely what point things had turned. I'll say that during that rally in Alaska where the president spoke with the troops, we were expecting to hear him kind of give them his analysis of what had happened in the summit, and he really didn't. He mentioned he'd been in Vietnam. He didn't really talk about Kim at all. We certainly took that as a sign that he wants to put this behind him now and move on. But, you know, when you look about this in the political context, the experts that I've talked to, what they were really worried about was that President Trump would give away too much. And I think his instinct was probably to be able to say, we reached, here's the declaration of peace, or here is an office that we're going to open in North Korea. But most of the experts, again, I talked to, I think were really relieved that he didn't do anything like dialing back the U.S. military posture. In terms of 2020, I'm not sure how much voters are going to care what happened with the second North Korea summit. I think in terms of what he's coming home to this week, he's probably pretty frustrated that he wasn't able to gain a little bit more ground on that summit as he comes home to Michael Cohen and all of these investigations.
Yeah, I got to say, I'm sure it is a much different Friday than he was anticipating. You get the sense that he wanted to be out there celebrating some kind of achievement today. That doesn't appear to be the case. All right, Margaret, Rebecca, Joe, thank you very much. We have breaking news. In the 2020 race, a new name joining the field of Democratic contenders, the crowded field. Washington's governor, this governor of the Washington state, Jay Inslee, just announced he is running, in a new video statement posted just moments ago. CNN's Vanessa Yurkevich is live in Seattle with that. Vanessa.
Good morning, John. Yeah, Governor Jay Inslee here in the state of Washington announcing that he is throwing his hat in the race for president. He is the 11th individual, the 11th major Democrat to announce a run or an exploratory committee. It's notable that he's the only governor to have announced thus far in what is largely a sea of Democrats. Governor Jay Inslee is in his second term here in the state of Washington. He was also a member of Congress. But what's really interesting is that in that announcement video that just came out a short time ago, he is running on a single issue, and that is climate change. Often when we hear people come out and announce, they talk about a couple issues: healthcare, immigration, income inequality. But for Governor Inslee, that issue that's most important to him is climate change. It's also notable and that it's in direct contrast to what the president has said about climate change, often questioning its validity, often questioning officials and scientists in his own administration and his own government on the issue. But let's take a listen to a little bit of Jay Inslee's campaign video that he released just a short time ago.
We have an opportunity to transform our economy, run on 100% clean energy that will bring millions of good-paying jobs to every community across America, create a more just future for everyone. I'm Jay Inslee, and I'm running for president because I'm the only candidate who will make defeating climate change our nation's #1 priority. We can do this. Join our movement. This is our moment.
We can expect to see the governor a little later today. He will have his first event as a candidate at a solar panel installer facility that's very much in line with his messaging. We'll also see him hit the road in Nevada and Iowa later this week. And Allison, he'll be out there sort of road testing this single issue as we get further and further into the race and more candidates announce. It'll be interesting to see, Allison, whether or not voters are very much interested in a single issue candidate and whether or not that issue is climate change, Allison.
Vanessa, really interesting. Just another candidate announcement that we bring you first on New Day, and we'll be watching to see what Governor Inslee does next. All right, so President Trump has claimed he could not make his tax returns public because they are under audit, but his former personal attorney casts doubt on that story. So we talked to a member of the House committee that could get the president's taxes. Next. Michael Cohen casting doubt on President Trump's repeated claim that he cannot release his taxes because they are under audit. So what will lawmakers do now? Joining us now to discuss is Republican Congressman Tom Reed. He serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, whose Democratic chairman has the legal authority to request President Trump's taxes. Congressman, thanks for being here.
It's great to be with you.
Do you want to see President Trump's taxes?
You know, I think going down this path of having the chair of the Ways and Means Committee request tax returns is a dangerous path. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of power, and if you weaponize this in this political environment, I will tell you, don't be surprised in the future years that other chairmen are going to use this for political purposes, and that's a danger that we need to recognize on this issue.
So your interest hasn't been piqued as to what's in President Trump's taxes?
You know, what I'm interested in, and there was a good conversation. I'll give credit to Chairman Neal. We had a hearing on this issue, and what we focused on in some of that conversation was, okay, these disclosure forms that we all file as candidates to protect the privacy of those that are affiliated with a candidate that's running for president. Why don't we focus on the disclosure forms, amend those, get all the information out in a more detailed analysis so that innocent bystanders also, their privacy has to be respected in this conversation, are not brought into this political warfare.
Do you believe the president's taxes are under audit?
I believe my understanding of the general audit policies out of the IRS, yes, a business of that magnitude, a business of that size is under a general audit type of situation, but I don't know that firsthand.
Of course you don't know it firsthand, and you don't know it for a fact because he hasn't produced any evidence or any letter that he's under audit.
Sure. So, but knowing how the IRS operates, knowing how the standards of audits for businesses such as what we're dealing with here, that wouldn't surprise me that that's the situation.
Did you change your opinion when you heard Michael Cohen, who worked with the president for 10 years very closely and knew a lot about his finances, when, let me remind everybody what Michael Cohen told the Oversight Committee on Wednesday. Listen to this.
What he didn't want was to have an entire group of think tanks that are tax experts run through his tax return and start ripping it to pieces, and then he'll end up in an audit.
So could you presume from that statement that he wasn't under audit?
I presume that he's not under audit.
Michael Cohen thinks that the president is not under audit and he just is trying to avoid scrutiny.
Well, I didn't hear that from Michael Cohen, and to believe Michael Cohen is a questionable foundation to start with. But, you know, he said presumed. If you're his personal attorney, why don't you know that? And you're talking about all the private information. You presume that he is? You assume that he is? I mean, that shows credibility issues with Michael Cohen.
Let me just read to you exactly verbatim what he didn't want. He's speaking about the president. What the president didn't want was to have an entire group of think tanks that are tax experts run through his tax return and start ripping it to pieces, and then he'll end up in an audit. That's from his conversation with the president.
And then when he was asked the follow-up question from my colleague, he said, I presume. I mean, why would you have to presume? If you're your private attorney, you either know that or not. Why do you have to make an assumption in that situation?
I don't know.
So I don't think that's a smoking gun type of situation. I think, you know, the facts are, the bottom line on the Trump tax issue, in my opinion, is, you know, if we go down this path of weaponizing the Ways and Means Committee for political purposes, we do it eyes wide open. Maybe there's a better way, and that's the alternative that I was advocating for. Reform these disclosure forms so people have information about the president and the vice president candidates, not everybody that's ever been associated with them over decades worth of business relationships.
So just to be clear, Congressman, you think that if President Trump has to release his taxes, that there'll be some sort, that willy-nilly all sorts of private citizens, the IRS is going to, and Congress is going to force them to release their taxes. That's what you're afraid of?
Yeah, that's on the tax returns. That's in the schedules. That's in the additional exhibits. Absolutely. A complicated tax return like that is going to get incidental business relationships disclosed, unless you redact everything. Yeah. And then you're going to have the question, well, is this really a credible release of tax returns because someone's hiding something?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you brought that up. Do you ever wonder what the president is hiding by not releasing them?
You know, I'll defer to the president as to his decision to release them. He did this openly. He did this with the American people, knowing he was not going to release them. He became
No, he
president.
promised he was going to. Actually, that's not true, Congressman. He promised that at some point he was going to release them, and then he didn't.
And he didn't. But at the time that people were voting, they knew exactly where the president stood on it. And that's where I trust the wisdom of the people on this election. He was duly elected our president, and now we're going to go through a year's worth of political theater on impeachment and other issues that are coming down the pipeline on the other side. And you know who loses in that entire conversation is the American people, where we have an opportunity to do something substantively before the people, rather than to distract on these attacks on impeachment.
Okay, let's move on, because I know that you're part of a bipartisan effort and legislation to prevent future presidents from being able to declare national emergencies and go around Congress. So, why did you support the president doing it this time?
Oh, absolutely, because remember, the resolution we voted on was under the National Emergency Act, and that is exactly the problem. Congress, under that act, has given tremendous authority to the president, and when we gave that authority away as Congress, because Congress and congressional leaders don't want to have the hard votes on record, the president has the authority to make these determinations and act. And when I looked at the border, I saw the crisis at the border. Given the fact that Congress delegated the authority, president has the authority to make that determination. I agreed with the assessment that it's a crisis. Now, what I'm very concerned about is, why do we delegate that authority to the president? Congress needs to take that authority back, and so that a president doesn't have this broad discretion that even this president and future presidents will have if we do not act.
But I mean, you could have blocked it this time. You could have voted to block it this time. Since you object to the overarching principle of a president being able to declare a national emergency and take the purse strings from Congress, you could have voted to block it this time.
But when there's a crisis and the law is the law, you have to follow the law as it exists. And the crisis, I agreed with the crisis determination by the president. What I do want is Congress to be co-equal in a national emergency declaration. And that's what this amendment that I'm proposing, and many of my colleagues in a bipartisan way are proposing, is we make sure Congress plays a role in this. We got 31 national emergencies on the books from the Carter administrations and beyond that are still there because the president has just acted. President Carter declared a national emergency, and it's still in effect today. Congress has advocated its role. Congress needs to step up, take its authority back.
Congressman Tom Reed, we appreciate talking to you on New Day. Thank you.
All right, Michael Cohen's testimony could be trouble for some Republican supporters of the president, and it could be trouble for some of his Democratic critics. Why both may now be in a no-win situation. That's next. Blood thicker than intelligence. That is the question this morning following this report in the New York Times, the report that President Trump ordered his chief of staff, John Kelly, to grant his son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner, a top-secret security clearance last year, overruling concerns flagged by intelligence officials and the White House top lawyer, Don McGahn. Joining us now to discuss this and much more, Michael Smerconish, the host of CNN's Smerconish. Michael, thanks so much for being with us this morning. You've read the report, you've listened to some of the coverage, and you have a slightly different take on what is most important here. What do you see?
Well, I think that all of the attention on why the president would be again at odds with the intelligence community, because that's really what this is about, is worthy and of interest. But I keep wondering, what is it about Jared Kushner that created all these questions to begin with? Is it the meeting at Trump Tower with the woman who was arriving promising dirt on Hillary Clinton? Is it the meeting that he never disclosed with Sergei Kislyak? Is it the idea that he had to set up a backdoor communication with the Russians and using the Russian embassy as sort of home base for that? What's the substantive grounds that he couldn't get the approval that was necessary when clearly he was the choice of the president to run this Middle East peace effort?
Is it possible you've just answered your own question, since you've just laid out a laundry list of things that he didn't disclose? I mean, that was part of the problem, is that in the security clearance paperwork, he didn't talk about the meeting with the bank chief in Russia with ties to the Kremlin. I mean, so what do you want the FBI and CIA to feel if he's not disclosing this?
Well, you raise a great point, and maybe the answer is then they should have flat out denied. I can't help but wonder if they wanted to deny, but that they were sort of held in check by the realization that this is the president's son-in-law, and so they dithered. It sat for a while, created this opening where the president could go to John Kelly and say, this is what I want you to do. Kelly papered the file. McGahn papered the file in classic CYA fashion, and then the president got what he wanted.
Michael, if I can change the subject for a moment. 7 hours and 21 minutes, Michael Cohen testified in public yesterday.
With a lunch break.
With a lunch break. That's not including the 2 days of behind closed doors testimony, but I want to focus on the public testimony. At the close of that hearing, What was the feeling you were left with? That you had just witnessed a long gathering of the Algonquin Roundtable, or was it something different?
I thought it was a preview of coming attractions. This is what an impeachment process will look like. It'll be little on facts and huge on partisanship. Everybody suited up in their usual armor. I had one observation, though, and that is that check. I'll bet that Roy Cohn, who was the original fixer for Donald Trump, is probably rolling over in his grave at the realization that Trump signed a check, regardless of what the intent was. I know that there's a tendency to look at that check and say, aha, there it is, Exhibit A for him violated campaign finance regulations. But there's a different interpretation. Michael Cohen said that Donald Trump and those at the highest level of the campaign never expected to win that election. By the way, that comports with my own knowledge of the Trump campaign. The figure that I heard is that they thought they'd tap out at 240. And regardless of what they say, they never expected to exceed 270. Well, if Michael Cohen is right, that the president never expected to win the election, doesn't that embolden the president's argument that he wrote that check to protect his brand, his marriage, his ability to have another reality TV show, and not to dissuade voters in the 11th hour of the campaign? Because after all, as Michael Cohen said, he didn't think he was going to win anyway.
Yeah, but he wrote it when he was in the White House. He wrote it after he won.
Also, right, but having cut the deal via Michael Cohen before, your great point, but he cut that deal before he became president. Why did he cut the deal? Mueller has to get into his head and assess his intent. And I think it'll bolster the argument that his intent was to protect himself because he didn't think when he woke up on Wednesday morning he'd be the president-elect.
What the prosecutors look at there, they say the timing of it right before the election does draw that into question. And AMI, as part of their agreement, that's the owners of the Inquirer, said in writing as part of those legal proceedings that their role in this was purely for political and campaign purposes. That's part of the legal process right now. But you're right. If and when this ever does come to a crime with the president, they will have to prove intent. Michael, I want to get your take on North Korea also. In the meetings that the president walked out of yesterday with Kim Jong-un, the president's back in the White House now. The president, people say it was better to walk away from a bad deal than accept a bad deal. But should he have ever been in that position in Hanoi if they weren't going to make a deal?
Usually what transpires is that all the work is done by the underlings, and by the time that the principals get together, they're just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So I'm critical of the president for being there if the deal wasn't already cut, but willing to give him credit for walking away, because I was one of those who, as the Michael Cohen hearing was unfolding, the public hearing, I was very worried that as a diversionary tactic, the president would cut a deal, any deal, just to try to change the narrative of what was being discussed at home. To his credit, he did not do that, and instead he packed his bag and got on that plane.
Michael Smerconish, great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
You too.
Be sure to watch Michael's show tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern right here on CNN.
All right, after years of blasting President Obama's arbitrary, quote, and hasty, quote, timetables for pulling out of Afghanistan, it looks like President Trump is about to do the same thing. We have a reality check for you next. A new report in the New York Times outlines a Pentagon plan that could have all U.S. troops withdrawing from Afghanistan in the next 3 to 5 years. Are we forgetting the lessons after 9/11? John Avlon has a reality check for us. John?
Marines are learning the lessons of 9/11 after they enlist now, literally. After all, some of them weren't even born when the attacks occurred. Welcome to America's longest war, now in its 18th year. Now, that's more than 4 times longer than World War II. And what do we have to show for it? Well, the New York Times is reporting that the U.S. military is offering to withdraw from Afghanistan entirely over the next 5 years, leaving the Taliban in control of a majority of the country. So much for learning the lessons of September 11th. A Taliban-controlled failed state is what created the safe haven for Osama bin Laden in the first place, which gave rise to this.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
That was the Bush doctrine, and it led us into Afghanistan and ultimately into a war of choice in Iraq. But currently, as our Clarissa Ward showed us with powerful exclusive footage, the Taliban still control or are fighting for roughly 60% of Afghanistan. Their ideology not only coddled terrorist training camps and blew up priceless statues of the Buddha, But its 7th century form of Sharia law left girls uneducated, women virtually enslaved, and the population brutalized. Now we are negotiating a one-sided peace deal with these people. And part of the reason why, the New York Times reports, is to fit into Trump's more isolationist instincts, no matter the cost. It's the same policy that precipitously pulling our troops out of Syria, ceding crucial ground to Vladimir Putin. The same policy that caused Defense Secretary Jim Mattis to quit in protest. Now, keep in mind that while he always pushed for withdrawing from Afghanistan, private citizen Trump repeatedly blasted President Obama's, quote, weakness and withdrawal timetables, all things Trump appears to be engaging in now. So after almost 2 decades of war, more than 2,300 troops dead, and more than $1 trillion spent, the Taliban is stronger and controls more territory than at any point since the conflict began. And the lost ground isn't just happening over there. The 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund, which is supposed to cover the long-term health needs of the first responders who ran into the flames, is about to run out of money again. And one of the reasons it's running out is that first responders are dying at a faster rate than ever before. And still, Senate Republicans can't seem to make the fund permanent. Jon Stewart, who's remained committed to this mission long after most celebrities moved on, has been to Capitol Hill several times on this issue already and can't believe he's back again.
This is nonsense. You guys know it. I know it. This is theater. We're all down here today. There's no reason to have dragged these people down here. There's no reason to have these conversations. It's bull.
He's right. Congress shouldn't need to be asked twice for this. I'm old enough to remember after the attacks one very popular slogan, never forget. But now, nearly 2 decades later, we seem to have forgotten, as we prepare to turn over a majority of Afghanistan to the Taliban, after America's longest war. And Congress can't even properly fund our first responders relief fund without prodding from a comedian. We can do better, and they deserve better. And that's your reality check.
John, such a good point. This one should be an easy one.
I can't believe we keep seeing Jon Stewart having to go to Washington to lobby for this. It really is stunning.
Thank you very much.
All right, intense body cam video captures Chicago police going beyond the call of duty. They rescued a man stuck in freezing cold water after he went in to save his dog. CNN's Ryan Young has the story.
Intense body cam video shows the moment Chicago police walk into a frozen Lake Michigan beach to rescue a man who had fallen through the ice.
Dude, give me a little space. Got a little space.
The man fell into the lake while trying to save his dog in several feet of freezing water. He became stuck between large crashing waves and blocks of ice too big and slippery to climb over. A look from above shows the danger officers faced. After a 911 call from a woman on the beach, at least 5 Chicago police officers rushed to the frozen beach, including Sergeant Alex Silva.
There was a lot of wave action. It was windy. It was extremely cold. It was below zero, I believe, that day. The water temperature is probably 33, 34 degrees, just above freezing.
Silva says icy water rescues aren't something he and his fellow officers train for. But with the man yelling that his hands were starting to go numb, waiting for firefighters to arrive wasn't an option.
We realized we're actually walking out over ice to get to him, which was nerve-wracking, but we had to get to him quickly.
The officers didn't hesitate, lying down on the unstable ice to form a human chain, using a dog leash to try and pull him out.
And then we just kind of, not even really talking to each other, we just kind of fell into place. You know, he went first, I went next to him, everyone behind us grabbed onto our belts.
Give me your hand. Pull yourself up! I barely... Come on! Hold me! Got this! Hold me, there we go. You're good. Come on. You're good. Thank you so much. You're good, dude. You're good.
The man the officers saved has chosen to remain anonymous since the rescue, but remains forever grateful for their heroic action. He wrote them a letter, which partly reads, "They absolutely saved my life, and I will be forever grateful. I have no doubt that I would have died without help."
Here, want to give him the dog? Yeah, just give him the dog. Give him the dog right in his lap.
I'm a police officer, absolutely, but you know, you're a person first. And if someone's in distress, I like to think that most people, given the opportunity, would try to help that person. It's all good. You know, the accolades are great, but you just feel good that you saved the person's life.
Oh my God! Oh my gosh! You're good, man. You're good.
Ryan Young, CNN, Chicago.
Oh my gosh, God bless those officers for that rescue. All right, now to this. She worked with Donald Trump for 18 years. So does she think the president is a con man and a cheat and a racist, as Michael Cohen described? We ask her next. A con man and a cheat. Critics of Cohen say that he is not a credible witness. So how do other people who worked for the Trump organization feel about that testimony? Joining us now is Barbara Rez. She's a former executive vice president with the Trump organization and author of All Alone on the 68th Floor, How One Woman Changed the Face of Construction. Barbara, great to see you.
Nice to see you.
You thought that Michael Cohen's testimony rang true to you?
It did, very much so, yeah. I mean, you know, I emoted. I reacted when he would say certain.
Like what?
Like when he said code. I understood what he meant by that.
That the president spoke in code. What does that mean?
In other words, he didn't have to say what he wanted you to do exactly. He just, you know, implied what would be good, what would be the right outcome, what would be something he'd like to see. And then, you know, that was make that happen without him telling you what to do.
Did you ever feel that you were asked to lie for the president, for Donald Trump at the time?
Yeah, I mentioned this in an article I wrote. I was asked to sign off on the functional obsolescence of the Bonwatello building before Trump Tower was built. And I'm an engineer, and I could do that, but I had no knowledge of it. So I said, no, I won't do it. And I think that set a tone for him where he really didn't ask me to do things that he knew I wouldn't do.
Why do you think that people, or if you believe the people around Donald Trump were willing to lie for him, as Michael Cohen was? Why was that?
Well, I think that, you know, you sort of broken into it slowly. It's a little thing, and then it's a bigger thing, and the next thing you know, you're really entrenched in it, and you start believing what Donald says, and, you know, you think it's true, too, you know, that kind of thing. So he sort of reels you in. And people want, you know, they want to win his favor. I did, too. I did things for him that, you know, I said to myself, but, you know, to curry favor and to say, oh, yeah, you know, yeah, he's the boss, and get the promotion or get the money or whatever. You know, so you get lured into it.
And so when Michael Cohen testified to all of these various crimes, I mean, the paying off of the porn star, the defrauding of a charity, the insurance fraud, the tax fraud, could any of that have happened without Donald Trump knowing about it?
I can't imagine anything happening of any import at all at the Trump organization, which is what we called it, without him knowing that.
He knew about things little and small?
Well, not little. I mean, you know, it depended on who he was talking to. Remember, years ago, he had a lot of faith in people and let them do their jobs, like me and architects and other people. I see him doing less and less of that now. People tell him what to do, and he does just the opposite. So my inclination is to say he probably gets into the little things, too, at this point. But anything major back then, and something like the Trump Tower meeting with the Russians, that was major, major. He would know about that, absolutely.
Why do you think it is that you are one of the only people from the Trump organization that will speak out about what your experience is? Why don't more people, past and present, speak about this?
Well, I think present people were all under non-disclosure agreements.
And you didn't have to sign it?
No, I didn't. The only people back when I was working for him, if you were fired, you know, you'd get severance pay, and in return for that, you'd promise not to disparage. I was never fired, so I didn't, you know. So I spoke to a lot of people that were there, and some people want to maintain their privacy, which is understandable, and others are afraid. I thought maybe I was going to help with the contribution to win the election for the Democrats back when, and I thought I was doing my part, to be honest with you.
But also, let's be honest, you have been on the receiving end of some threats when you spoke out. From whom?
Well, Michael Cohen called me. The first article I wrote, which I thought was somewhat flattering to Trump, it was very balanced, and said something like, to the effect, you have my home number, the effect that it was slanderous, not slanderous, libelous or defamation. And, yeah, it was sort of going in that direction. I said, Michael, I have people here. I really can't discuss this now, but I will call you back. Give me your number. And I just never called him back, and that was the end of it.
But, I mean, you took it as a threat.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Barbara Rez, thank you. We appreciate you being able